Hello everybody, James here. So after a week of downtime on the entire WSI network, I'm well enough to finally sit up and not pass out at this point, which is all thanks to what turned out to be what we think is cryptosporidium, which is basically something I've eaten or drunk and it's been infected. So if I don't sound right or I'm struggling a bit, it's because I am. Anyway, we'll get through this, I'm sure. So on the rare occasions I do get sick, I've got good fortune at least, I guess, silver lining, to not really miss anything in the wrestling world, at least nothing too major anyway. But one quote that I did read, it started floating around a few days ago, probably beforehand as well, but it kept making like a second amount of rounds, I guess. It's from The Undertaker. It piqued my interest. Now, this quote itself actually came from the same episode of 6 Feet Under with The Undertaker, that the Undertaker and Michelle McCool were sat there reading mean tweets and valid criticisms, quite frankly, of a podcast that's fallen off a cliff since the very much forced departure of the old co-host Matt. Now, on the original video I did last week, or the week before, whenever it was, I focused pretty much solely on how under the thumb The Undertaker came across on that, and this next quote that we're going to actually play and we're going to listen to, I kind of missed out that there's almost like a level of delusion going on with the situation and sort of Undertaker's almost trying to babyface himself a bit too much and really not doing a good job of it. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that, especially the word delusion that that I mentioned before, and I'm going to say again as well later. Now, once again, for the people who haven't heard the Michelle McCool version of 6 Feet Under with The Undertaker rather than Mark Calloway, which was the original name, it's unlistenable. If there's one thing I cannot stand, it's unlistenable to me, there's one thing I cannot stand, it's a co-host doing, is talking all over the main star of the show all the time. Look, I've even done it as well. I try my best not to. I catch myself doing it on occasion, especially because there's a second delay sometimes with the internet calls that we're doing, so it can just be a mistimed thing, or it can also be me interrupting to give a factoid out, or occasionally I'll just do it and just forget myself that we're doing a podcast and not just having a chat. But similarly, it's kind of the hallmark of somebody who wants to be a podcaster who is being such a mark for themselves that they just want to hear their own voice. Anyway, even in the audio clip I'm going to play you're going to hear it numerous times. Unnecessary crosstalk and Michelle talking over, wanting to herself to be heard and talking over her husband, and it's something, and adding value, or things she adds value when she doesn't. It's something I really hate. You can tell it's a bugbear of mine. But anyway, firstly, somebody wrote in to basically call Mr. McCool a great big fanny for letting his wife horn in on everything he does and run his life. Well, here's the actual clip itself.
But
oh, hang on.
Well, Crested Saguaro 520, you know what he said?
No.
He said he truly believes that The Undertaker is a good guy at heart, but
here we go.
But he gives his wife too much. I could never be married to a woman who wants to have control over everything, and furthermore, I would tell her no.
Wow.
Okay. So you can argue there that obviously the guy writing it doesn't actually know what he's talking about. At least in their personal life, you can have an idea of maybe professional, but personal life is probably unfair. And we don't know that Michelle makes all the decisions or every decision in The Undertaker or Mark Calloway's life, of course. Now, The Undertaker answers that and says, he starts off by saying that there's only a small select group of people he cares about the opinion of, which is a fine stance to take. And I think more people could actually learn from that. But then he starts downplaying, for whatever reason, he starts downplaying the amount of influence he has in WWE, and to tell you the truth, I don't know why. So we'll just forward it through somewhere around here.
Of the guys that I've ever been in a dressing room with or worked in a territory with, they're going to tell you that as much clout as I supposedly have, or even if I do, I never ever would have used it for that kind of crap. And it's just, it's absurd that people get on the internet and can use words like reliable sources and this and that, and everybody believes it. And I'm not gonna go into details, and I'm not gonna give anybody that kind of I'm not going to give anybody that kind of satisfaction of me having to explain myself.
Or, you offer proof of the contrary, I guess.
A lot of people want to stay relevant that way, though.
Well, I think there's a lot of that. And then there's a lot of people on the internet that just think, well, I mean, I'm like, well, that has to be what he's doing, because if I had that kind of juice, that's what I would do.
And that's the problem. Y'all are the problem.
Yeah. But again, my inner circle.
And he says everyone can kiss his ass, basically, afterwards. Right. We're going to get to that one quote about the clout stuff in a minute, but let's brush past the point that, jeez, I told you I wasn't feeling well, that there's nothing like proving you don't care what people on the internet say by making repeated statements on your own podcast to let people know how the criticism absolutely doesn't bother you. What I am interested in here is when The Undertaker here starts downplaying the amount of clout that he has in WWE. Once again, here's the quote. As much clout as I supposedly have, or even if I do, I never ever would have used it for that kind of crap. Now, what he's referring to is clout using, that word's going to keep on coming up, clout of using his backstage influence or whatnot to get Michelle all these different jobs in WWE in a short space of time. I think that's pretty much what he's getting at. So, here's one thing to address first. The Undertaker has tons of clout in WWE. Cachet power, once again, whatever you want to call it. Tons of it. Still in 2025, and maybe even more than ever. And there's tons of proof as well. So, once again, here's the quote. As much clout as I supposedly have, or even if I do, he would never use it for nefarious means or nepotistic reason, if that's a word. Or for any of that kind of crap. Okay. The Undertaker remains one of the biggest stars, even in several years after retirement. We're going to be talking about not only The Undertaker actually having clout, proving he does, or attempting to anyway, that he's used it in the past. So, one of the biggest stars, even several years after retirement for WWE, a main event star in WWE for decades now. If you want to argue The Undertaker wasn't really figured into the office when he was wrestling Giant Gonzalez or King Kong Bundy, you might have a point. I'm sure he would have chosen not to wrestle either of them or feud with either at the time, but by the early 2000s, I'm pretty sure Taker could work with whoever he wanted. And you remember the feud with Diamond Dallas Page that saw his then-wife Sarah eventually pin the former WCW champion. I'm going to say that was clout, and I'm going to say that wasn't entirely Diamond Dallas Page's call, or even maybe the creative's call. I think maybe Taker might have had something to do with it. That's my guess, though. How about when he brought in Bryan Adams? This is around the same time. In fact, Bryan Adams and Brian Clark, Chronic they were his friends, not afterwards probably, during the WCW invasion, only to then have them fired immediately because he didn't like that one match they had. And it wasn't even all their fault. It wasn't Brian Clark's fault. It was a bit The Undertaker's fault, I'm sure it was. It wasn't even that bad as a whole, the match. Anyway, that's clout. The Undertaker banned games in the back, computer games, video games, whatever you want to call them. Because guys weren't miserable or bored enough on the road, not seeing the families and trying to kill time, and the 8 hours a day between call time and bell time, I guess. Why? I don't know. I guess The Undertaker was sick of all these namby-pambies sitting around socialising instead of, drinking Jack or polishing their 6-shooters or whatever bizarre explanation he gave on the Joe Rogan Experience a couple of years ago. Like, men, clout that was. He could actually go to Vince McMahon and say, this backstage pastime with everyone laughing and joking and enjoying each other's company, that's got to end. We've got to be talking more about cribbage or, I don't know, wrestling or whatever it is. I don't know. Anyway, The Undertaker was also a locker room leader, or the locker room leader, really. It had been for decades. The conduit between the boys and the office, kind of an important position. I'm going to say that's clout. I'm going to also say that he enacted judgment or gave his opinion on occasion. That would be clout, whatever. Anyway, he was also the judge for all the wrestlers' court appearances and sessions. Well, he was rendering judgments there. That's pretty clouty, I'd say. And he's now also apparently helping book AAA, and it's said to be incredibly influential in the promotion. The Undertaker is booking a Mexican promotion. Why? I don't know. Is anybody's guess, because he never worked for AAA or CMLL or any Mexican promotion as far as I can tell, or was ever even a massive fan of Lucha Libre. Yet he was given this position after publicly posting or mentioning, even maybe on his old podcast at the time, saying he just likes to give booking a go. And all of a sudden he's offered booking. That's a lot of clout. Anyway, through all these decades, The Undertaker was best friends with his boss, Vince McMahon. He looked at Vince as a second father. Vince looked at The Undertaker as the son he always liked. And then The Undertaker, along with maybe only Triple H, is as close to as any wrestler's ever got to Vince McMahon without having to sign a non-disclosure agreement afterwards. He had the ear of Vince McMahon for decades. He had the power to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to talent, suggest hirings and firings, which we know he did, discuss the shows, discuss the creative, turn down or adjust creative that he didn't like, etc., which I'm sure he did many, many times. I'm sure many more times he went along with what Vince or the writers wanted him to do, which is why I'm saying that The Undertaker, I'm not saying he wasn't a company man, I'm saying he's the ultimate company man, quite frankly. But what I am also saying is that The Undertaker claiming that he doesn't have clout or he's downplaying clout, or, well, maybe even if I do kind of thing, like somehow anyone would think he doesn't have any backstage influence in WWE, especially in 2025, is kind of laughable. Anyway, once again, The Undertaker is saying clout, or is he using said clout for the right reasons? Who knows? But most likely, I've never heard of anybody saying, man, The Undertaker really screwed me over, at least not overtly anyway. But now, once again, Taker is claiming that nepotism is not playing any part in his thought process of having his wife Michelle McCool in all these projects that he's got going on. And to recap once again, here lies the ridiculously prominent positions that his wife Michelle McCool has attained in WWE, re being given in just this year alone. Michelle McCool was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, wholly undeserved if you just go by achievements. You can say that about quite a few people in the WWE Hall of Fame, but that definitely applies to Michelle McCool. Yes, once again, The Undertaker's wife in the WWE Hall of Fame. If that isn't clout, then I don't know what is. And furthermore, the WWE Hall of Fame, The Undertaker, I'm pretty sure, is on the committee that picks who goes into the damn WWE Hall of Fame. And I say this because he basically admitted it himself when he and Shawn Michaels got on the stage last year and announced that or was it last year or was it even this year? I don't know. Got on the stage and announced that Triple H was going to be inducted. So, excuse me. He actually basically said, well, me and Shawn, as the most tenured guys here, we were talking and we have decided that you're going to be in the WWE. They decided it, basically. So The Undertaker, definitely has a lot of influence, and he uses that influence. And we'll get onto that again, actually, in a second, because I want to say this first, is that it sort of exposes what WWE, with all these inductions the last year or two, and in the future as well, that WWE's always what it has been, one giant incestuous backslapping circle jerk of a place where they induct themselves and their wives and their friends into the Hall of Fame regardless of whether they deserve it or not. And even Paul Heyman, who absolutely does deserve a WWE Hall of Fame induction, got the nod despite being very much active in the company, which is completely against the usual protocol in WWE. And I am sure The Undertaker, who used to be managed by Paul in WCW, I'm sure has been friends with him for decades, had a big say in it. Now, and let's not forget Stephanie McMahon's going in as well. And The Undertaker, made the announcement to induct her. So Michelle McCool, once again, this is a different thing, replaces Mickie James on the WWE LFG show as a judge or trainer or whatever they're meant to be on that show. Are you telling me that The Undertaker, who has, according to him, never used his so-called influence, whether it exists or not, to get Mickie canned in favour of Michelle McCool on the LFG show that just so happens to feature him on it as well as the main star of the show? Are you actually really saying that with a straight face, that actually you've never used your influence for that? Or Michelle didn't say, hey, I'd really love to be part of that show. Leave it with me, say no more. Anyway, Michelle McCool is also the replacement host of 6 Feet Under with The Undertaker, now one of WWE's flagship podcasts. Once again, we cannot harp on this point enough. If I understand the situation correctly, original co-host Mark was keyhauled off his own podcast he helped develop with The Undertaker when The Undertaker sold it from under his nose without telling him to WWE and then replaced Matt with his own wife. And we're saying that he would never use his clout or his influence to get Michelle a job or undue whatever it is. Come off it. seriously. I mean, you just lay out the facts here, and the delusion has set in. I don't know whether he's trying to gaslight everybody who's listening, or he actually believes this, which would be kind of sad. But The Undertaker, so once again, he's claiming, even if he did have clout in WWE, supposed, which is the word he used, I think, then there's no nepotism. He wouldn't do that kind of thing. Anyway, that's beneath him. So therefore, we've only got one reasonable conclusion to draw from all this, and that is that Michelle McCool attained all of these positions in WWE over the past 9 months or so, purely through her own tireless work and dedication and talent, and most of all, enduring popularity. So, here's the thing. Michelle McCool was the second most popular person in Laycool. Michelle McCool is the definition of somebody who was with the company for a bit, had a fairly unmemorable run during a down period in WWE, and then left. Nobody was clamouring for a major return of Michelle McCool for anything in WWE in 2025, or pretty much anywhere, I would put to you, dear viewer. And I'm sure she's a lovely person. This has nothing to do with her personality or what she's like in real life or anything like that. I just don't like being gaslit by her husband telling us that he would never use his influence to get his wife a job, or on the podcast or on LFG or whatever it is, when I cannot reasonably, and I doubt anybody of reasonable sound mind could see any other way than that is the reason why Michelle McCool is now a prominent part of the WWE family all of a sudden, publicly. And here's something else I was told not too long ago. The Undertaker, during the original run of the One Dead Man shows, this is the spoken word one-man shows that he was doing where he was just telling tales from his career kind of thing, he would bring out a different guest at the second half of every show, every show as well. So, it'd be someone like a Mick Foley or a Henry Godwin or whoever it might be, former opponents, real-life friends from within the business, and they talk about wrestling in the 90s and 2000s and have a good old time. And then somewhere a year or two ago, things changed. Instead of a different guest for every One Dead Man show, it would be his wife, Michelle McCool, every single time. The phrase I was given was, the air got sucked out of the room as soon as she was announced. So there you go. So obviously it wasn't working for the One Dead Man shows, it's not working for the podcasts, and here's why I'm going to say that actually. That podcast where we pulled that quote from, and the original quote that I referenced in the video I did 10 days or so ago, that video, at least on YouTube, of the full episode has done 74,000 views on a YouTube channel that has 110 million subscribers. Less than 1/3 of the amount of views that I achieved on my channel with 40,000 subscribers moaning about that podcast. That's not normal. And one, I'm baffled so many people watched that video. 2, I'm very appreciative people did. 3, that must surely tell people that the dynamic's wrong and blah, 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 and people don't want to see Michelle. She was in the thumbnail for the most recent video. She was in the thumbnail for the first video, I think, and not by coincidence, I'm quite sure I'm right in saying. In fact, I'm going to say they are by far the least viewed videos of all of them in the most recent one, WWE podcast. I'm even going to double check that, one sec. Yeah, so here we go. So, right, 297, 177, 418, 530, 200, 170. So, I'm actually right. The first one and the last one, the two that feature Michelle McCool, have got by far the lowest views. Well, apart from that last 117, 177 with Bubba Ray Dudley. So, I mean, surely there's problems there anyway. But it's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about The Undertaker basically gaslighting us, saying that if he does have clout with WWE, he'd never use it for nepotism reasons. But here's the thing. As The Undertaker said himself, and he made it clear on that same episode, that, he does those podcasts for fun, so either listen or don't, he doesn't care because he doesn't need the money. So once again, for The Undertaker, he's not only part of the WWE establishment, he is the physical embodiment of the WWE establishment these days. To claim that he either has no clout, or even if he did have clout, he'd never use it for personal gain or whatnot, I look forward now, before Christmas time, to Michelle McCool being announced as co-booker of AAA. That is my prediction before the end of 2025, or at least the beginning of 2026, I think. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, etc. It's good for the algorithm. I'm going to be building up this channel more as time goes on. Maybe in a future video, but I will be explaining it soon. What happened to Listmania? It's a very long and very weirdly in-depth story. Don't worry, the content is... more content like that's going to be coming out, but I'm going to be explaining exactly my thought process, what happened to that channel, and why, and all that kind of thing. But anyway, watch out for that video and subsequent videos coming out, and I'll see you soon.